Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be making a pretty useless video. I don't think absolutely anybody will ever care about, but it's something I've always found interesting. And today I'm going to go over how to play Call of Duty on the PC with a Wii Classic Controller. I don't know why you would ever want to, and I'm sure my friends will make fun of me for it because they think it's stupid as well. But I've always found it interesting, like I said. So I'm sure we've all heard of Call of Duty on the Wii. You know, put up some gameplay and whatnot. What's interesting about Call of Duty on the Wii is the Wii featured a classic controller, which was basically a controller that had, that looked much like a PlayStation controller, Xbox controller. Two joysticks, triggers, bumpers, a D-pad, some 4 buttons on the side. It's interesting because the Wii is known for the motion controller, but there was always a classic controller. Now the original classic controller is pretty goofy and dorky, but they came out with the Classic Controller Pro, which is what I've been displaying here, which kind of has the handles already built in and the triggers in more of a reasonable location. But yeah, so starting in Black Ops 1, not the original Call of Duties that were released, because there was COD 4 and World at War, and in those games they didn't support the classic controller. Starting in Black Ops 1, though, they did support the classic controller, and in typical Wii fashion, using the classic controller actually isn't the same as any other controller. You're probably wondering why, because when you look at it, it looks totally normal, I guess. But the big deal breaker here is that the joysticks don't click in. Now, I don't know why this has always fascinated me, but it has. It's just interesting. Like, you could play a game where the controls are very well kind of laid out, and then they tried to adapt it to the Wii, and they had to kind of like rethink stuff. Now, that's not the only weird and interesting thing about these controllers. The other weird thing is that the controller itself isn't its own, wireless device. It has to actually plug into a Wii remote, which is totally goofy, but that's how they've done it. And then, when you go in the game on Black Ops, the controls are going to be a little different. So first of all, what do the joysticks clicking in normally do on any other controller? Well, I think we all know the left one is the sprint button and the right one would be the melee button. And since we don't have those buttons on the Wii controller, we have to come up with an alternative solution. So the goal here is to remap the controls on the controller the same way that they've been remapped on the actual Call of Duty games on the Wii, so that we can use the controller in-game. Now, the way we're going to do that is with a pretty cool program that I'll show in a little bit, but first we need to actually understand how Call of Duty has remapped the controls to make up for the lack of basically 2 critical buttons. So if we actually go into the in-game menu, we can take a good look at the button layout in the game and kind of see, but I decided to make my own little diagram here so we can carefully go through what they've done. So here you'll see a typical layout for the controls on a normal controller like an Xbox or a PlayStation controller. But obviously, as I was just saying, sprint and melee don't exist. So what do? Well, in the default profile, basically what they've done to make up for the lack of the sprint button, they've combined sprint with jump. Now this does work, and it works pretty well, but it is kind of weird at the same time, because now the game has to actually decide what action to do when you press the button. And basically, if you're standing still or moving sideways or backwards and you press the button, you will jump. Of course, if you're crouched or prone and you press it, you'll stand first. But if you press it, again, standing still or moving any other direction but forward, you will jump. But then if you're moving forward and you press it, you'll sprint, and then if you want to jump while you're sprinting, you have to press it again. And it's kind of weird how they describe it, but that is basically how it works. And so that's where they've moved the sprint button. As far as the melee button, what they do is, at least in Black Ops 1 specifically, since Black Ops 1 was the first game to try and implement this controller, in Black Ops 1, the D-pad down, the bottom button, or the down button on the D-pad, is never used for any inventory in any of the various game modes. It's basically an unused button. So Treyarch took advantage of that and decided to actually switch weapon to D-pad down, freeing up the X button, or the top button, which normally would be Y or the triangle on our more familiar controllers, freeing that up to be used for something else. Now switching weapons with D-pad down is actually pretty easy, and it's not super difficult or weird actually once you get used to it. Especially the way the Wii controller is laid out, you can even kind of roll your thumb over there and hit it even while you're walking or moving. It really isn't that big of a nuisance to adapt to, in my opinion at least. Of course, now that we've freed up the top button, we can go ahead and move the melee button to there. So that is the default, button layout for if you're using a classic controller in Black Ops 1. So can we recreate this with a special remapping tool on the PC? Well, the answer is actually no. The reason we can't recreate this exact layout is because of the jump sprint button. The jump sprint button kind of requires the game to be involved, right? The game has to know if you're moving or whatever, moving forward, standing still, in order to determine what to do with that button. And it's not like we can just hook up some outside program to every single Call of Duty game we want to play and magically program that kind of functionality into it. So we actually just cannot use this layout. So back to square one. Now if we keep scrolling through the button layout options on Black Ops, on the menu, right, there's actually more than one layout. And if we come to this button layout here, you'll see this button layout is actually doable. So the first thing you'll notice is, again, it's a given that we're going to have the switch weapon moved to the D-pad down. That's just, again, that's a unused button technically in Black Ops 1. It's just the perfect place to, relocate something. But this time, with that free button, we're going to move sprint to that free button. So now sprint and jump are separated, and again, from having played with it for quite a while, going and pressing that button for sprint is actually kind of natural, and again, not super counterintuitive or anything. It's a little weird, obviously, if you played for your whole life on a normal controller, but it does work. However, that's where we had moved the melee button in the default profile. So, well, now where does the melee button go? Well, actually, the melee button now goes to the right bumper, or where the lethal grenade button would normally be, which also, again, kind of makes sense because it's it's kind of like an attack button area, right? I mean, using one of the triggers or bumpers, whatever you want to call it, is a normal attack button setup. But okay, well, now where does lethal grenades go, right? We kind of spiral into this loop of relocating stuff. Well, actually, now instead of having a lethal and tactical grenade button, we switch the left bumper to a grenade modifier button. And basically, if you want to throw a grenade, you hold the grenade modifier with one finger, and then then use the triggers as you're holding the modifier button to throw lethals or tacticals instead of firing or aiming. So it's a little goofy, but again, I've been playing, every now and then I like to hop on and play with the controller, so I've gotten used to it. And again, it is an official control layout that they came out with, I guess to avoid combining sprint and jump, and it does work. Now, is this creatable in a remapping software? The answer is yes, because now we don't have any buttons that are like combined and dependent on the game's input. Everything is fundamentally separate. Even though we do have a modifier button, we can create a modifier functionality in the program that I use. One last detail I want to go over before we get into actually connecting up the controller and getting things set up is the D-pad. Now, like I said, we're using the down button as switch weapon, which does work pretty nicely, which is a miracle because it is sort of awkward, but and this is perfect in Black Ops 1 because, like I said, that button is never used. Not even on PC, there's never a downwards inventory in any game mode, not even any DLC zombies or whatever. But what happens when you get to the later Call of Duties? On the Wii U released Call of Duties, the Black Ops 2 and Call of Duty Ghosts, which are the final two before they just quit trying to make Wii Call of Duties altogether. Even though the Wii U has a proper controller that has clickable sticks and normal controls, and even a gamepad with proper controls as well, they still did support the classic controller, which is interesting. And the way they set it up in those games, because in both of those games you do use your whole inventory, real estate, it's pretty neat. They actually kind of took inspiration from the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, where the Wii Remote is very limited on buttons, and they combine all of the inventory into one D-pad button by making it an inventory modifier, kind of like the grenade modifier. So instead of using all of the D-pad, now we're just using D-pad left. Basically, you hold that button and use your right stick to select up, down, left, or right. And this, again, it's awkward, but it actually does work. And again, that is something we can recreate in the software that I use. So yeah, that is our control layout. That's what we're going to try and replicate. So let's go ahead and go over how to get all that set up. So like I said earlier, the Wii Classic Controller is interesting because it's not its own device. You do have to have it connected to a separate Wii Remote. So what we're going to be doing is actually connecting the Wii Remote to the PC. So to do that, we're going to use a program called WinUsoft. So we'll open it up here. Now it does have this, and by the way, you do need Bluetooth to do this. It does have this sync devices menu, and I guess it was intended to just have you press the red button and this program will automatically connect the remote for you, but I never really happen to have luck with that. So what I personally have to do is, while this is open, I need to go to my PC settings and go to my devices and printers, and I actually need to add device every time. Then of course, if you're familiar with Wii remotes, you'll know there is a red button you can press, the lights will start flashing. Oh, I'm sorry guys, I didn't really get to capture the process, but usually I add device and you'll find the, this basically is what I see, and then you'll follow through and go ahead and get it all connected up. Once it's connected though, you'll see it showing up here. You can always try again the sync button. If that does work for you, that's great. It can be a little finicky, but anyways, like I said, once you've got this showing up here, then you've done it right. Alright, it's connected, and then we can go ahead and press this add as X input device, and then whatever we select, I'm pretty sure is what will show up. And now we're connected as an Xbox controller. Now the classic controller is basically acting as an Xbox controller to Windows, and then you'll know it's working if you see your Wii remote's little number 1 light working. So the first thing I like to do is click on this wrench icon, and that'll go to the button setup, and we're not going to make our main edits in this program because this program doesn't have any sophisticated functionality like holding a modifier button to then change other controls. But what you will notice from default in this program is that the Y and X and A and B will directly correspond to the same letter on the Xbox controller, which will actually mean the mapping is incorrect. So if we see Y is going to the top and X is going here, B is going there. So what you'll want to do is kind of remap all of these correctly and then save. And now I've already done this and I've got this profile, but you'll just make a new profile. But I've already done this, and we can go in and see that once I load my default, every time it does save correctly. The next thing you'll want to do is get the joysticks calibrated, which unfortunately you do have to do every time. But you'll go to the Properties tab and go to a Custom Calibration and follow these steps. The first step says keep both joysticks untouched. Click on Next, and then you'll come move these in a complete circle to get it just have it identify the full scope of how it can move and the values that correspond to that. And then it wants you to find the dead zone, so if you just kind of put some light pressure and wiggle it without actually truly moving it, you might hit some dead zone. As you can see, I actually didn't hit some dead zone there. But once you do that, you hit done, hit save, and you should be all good to go. Once we've done that, we'll keep this program open for the whole, while we're using this. And then we'll go to the real star of the show here. Oh, we're loading. Is ReWASD. This is a pretty cool program that without this, you couldn't play with the Wii controller on PC. But again, pretty cool program because you can really remap stuff in detail. Now this did cost money. I believe I paid $25 for it somewhere like 3 or 4 years ago, but it is not a subscription. It is a one-time purchase and it's yours. But I don't know of anything else similar. But as you can see, I've got my Call of Duty profile here, and whenever you apply, or actually it already is on, it'll basically cancel the factory Xbox controller. Why did I say factory? But the one that's coming from the Winnie-Soft, the direct kind of emulation, and it'll replace it with its modified version, which has all of our changes. So I'm not going to remake this profile, but we can take a look at what I've done. So first of all, going back to our diagram, the main changes we want to make, our jump we left alone, use, crouch, it's all the same. Now I left the right stick and left stick, those are the buttons there, but they don't, obviously those don't exist, so we can't even press them. But the first thing is I've moved switch weapon to D-pad down, and you do that by opening it, and you can choose what type of mapping you want. So you can make it obviously map to gamepad controls, or even mouse and keyboard, or commands, whatever you want. It's a pretty cool program for all sorts of other things, not just this goofy little idea I've got going. But anyways, you can see I've remapped that to the Y button because that would normally be switch weapon. For D-pad left, I've got this in shift mode, which jumps to another layer, which will change the right stick to be our inventory buttons. The way you do this is, you can see I've got it, let's go back to how it normally would be, but basically this would be the menu you normally see. I have it set where it won't actually do anything, right? It won't press any button. And then we just go to shift mode, and then jumped. I have my first layer as that, and then I have it set to hold, so obviously only as you hold it will it jump to that layer, and then again just none for the mapping. These are different types of shift mode settings, but I've got just a single press where it says the mapping fires when the button is held. So that's the left D-pad will shift to the layer for our right joystick to take over inventory, which we'll get to that in a little bit. And then of course for up and right, those are now just permanently unused, which is pretty cool. We end up with unused buttons on such a crowded controller. But now that we've moved our switch weapon over to here, this button would be free, and in which case we've remapped it to left stick, which would be sprint. Going back to our diagram, that's what we would need to do. And so that takes care of sprint. As for melee, we've mapped the right bumper to melee in place of lethal grenades. If you want to see the trigger, you have to kind of flip view here, and then that's our right trigger is normal. Our left trigger, we've done something, I will get to that in a second, but basically, yeah, we've remapped this. Again, if you just want to remap it, you open it, and you can select from all the different buttons in the list. You can actually, again, use this kind of as your filtering. So if I only want Xbox controller buttons, I just unclick these four, and when you open it, you just only get controller buttons. You can remap it to whatever you want. And then again, for our grenades, since we now use a grenade modifier, I've done the same thing as the D-pad. I put it where it's not actually doing any button, and then it's going to shift mode. And then that shifts to a different layer where we have some grenade functionalities. And then again, the left trigger I've got doing something interesting, which I'll go over in a second. So once you have your D-pad to your shift layer 1 for your inventory, your grenade modifier to shift layer 2, and again we're even using a shift layer 3, then you would come over to your layer section and start actually making the changes in the layers. So as you can see, this button, it automatically kind of knows that's that's the button that brought us to this layer. And then for the joystick, I individually map all the movements now to the D-pad. So again, when you hold the left D-pad, it shifts to this layer, and our right joystick becomes totally the inventory buttons. For the grenades, same deal. This button is our grenade modifier. It brings us to this layer. If we flip the controller, we have our trigger buttons. As you can see, I've just remapped them to the bumper buttons. So now as you hold the grenade modifier, the triggers will become the grenade buttons as you hold it. One really nice thing about this app that it just kind of does on its own that I love is if you hold the grenade modifier and then press the right trigger to throw a lethal, but you want to hold the lethal, or even the left trigger, right? If you want to hold whatever, you want to hold a grenade, you don't actually have to hold the modifier the entire time. If you let go of the modifier and you are still holding one of the triggers, this app will recognize that and just keep the modified button held until you release it. So you just literally barely have to tap the grenade modifier button to do anything, and then you don't even have to hold it, even if you want to hold a grenade. So it's pretty cool. It's actually, again, not as intrusive or a nuisance button layout if you get used to it. The final layer I have is when you aim. So when you aim it, now the difference with this button is, unlike the other modifier buttons, this one is still acting as the left trigger because it still needs to aim. But what I have this layer for is when you are aiming with a sniper. I'll try and find or get some footage of it, but normally when you aim with a sniper, you obviously, in the typical controller, would use your left joystick, the sprint button, to hold your breath. Now on this remapped version, right, we've moved our sprint button to Y. And obviously if you were trying to hold your breath with Y and aim, that just wouldn't work out. So what they've done on the Wii is they actually turn the grenade buttons into your sprint, or your hold breath and your change zoom, because obviously you wouldn't be throwing a grenade while you're aiming. And you wouldn't be sprinting either. So that's what I've done in this third shift layer, is the trigger button, or the aiming button, will bring you here, and then I've changed our grenade modifier button, which would normally be nothing with a modifier. I changed it to the left joystick again, so you can hold that to hold your breath. And then this right trigger, already being the melee button, will already be your change zoom the way it is on the Wii. With that, that's the full controls. When you want to use it, it'll tell you this stuff. Down here, you just press this power button and it'll say Call of Duty Config 1 is now active, and it's effectively replacing my controller, which is pretty cool. Or replacing the controller with, well, it's already a virtual Xbox controller, but now it's replacing that virtual Xbox controller with its own virtual Xbox controller with totally remapped buttons. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool. Now I gotta go in game and show you it working. Alright, so now that I'm in game, I wanted to get some footage of it working, which we can even see it works in the controls here, but I need to raise my sensitivity a little bit. Let's see, it's been a while since I've played on controller now, but every now and then I hop on with this thing. But as you can see, sprint is pretty intuitive. Even if I'm walking, I can switch weapons actually pretty easily, even though it's in a fairly goofy location. And if I want to throw a grenade, I can easily throw a grenade.
Reaper down.
And then you have melee. I've played quite a few zombies games and campaign playthroughs like this, which is kind of funny. But everything works with our little ReWASD remap.
Scrap. Dropped. Threat down. Dropped.
Alright. And I got a kill streak. So we can see if I press D-pad
TACCOM, get off.
and use it,
Dropped.
it works. Sorry, and I used my right joystick. I also can hold the modifier and press both triggers to get the specialist weapon out too if I wanted. So even that works, but yeah. Oh, I died. But that's about it. That's how we play Call of Duty on the PC with a Wii Classic Controller. I know, everybody's dream, right? This is probably a totally worthless video to make, but I wanted to make it because it's something I, just like I said at the beginning, always thought it was cool for some reason how this thing exists, how goofy it is, and then the fact that it has its own unique control mapping, which is just totally, you know, bizarre compared to literally anything else. But that would be all. Thank you for watching.